Hey guys, tonight we dive into a world where dust kicks up from cavalry hooves and the wind smells like burnt incense and iron. You're standing at the edge of the 10th century, in the eastern stretches of the Byzantine Empire, where mountain passes echo with chants and the borderlands bleed uncertainty. You're about to become Nikephoros II, Phocas General, Emperor, monk sort of, and one of the most sleep-deprived men ever to reform an entire army while fighting off wave after wave of invaders. You might think you're in for a glorious ride of gold-embroidered tunics and dramatic imperial decrees. But let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins not in a palace or a marble-columned forum, but in the dust-caked military encampments of Cappadocia. Sometime around 912, the empire's eastern provinces, rough and frayed, are perpetually grazed by Arab raids. And you're born smack in the middle of it all. You don't cry like most babies, you shriek like a war horn. Or at least that's how the story goes when your nursemaid retells it decades later. The family is the Phocas clan, a name already spoken with a kind of wary admiration. Your father, Bardas Phocas the Elder, is a general who commands whole legions like most men order breakfast. Your first cradle is likely a well-padded saddlebag. Your lullabies, the clink of armor, and the snore of weary guards. There's no soft court music here, just wind whistling through pine trees, and the occasional distant sound of someone shouting in Arabic or Armenian. Depending on the week, it's a borderland of languages, loyalties, and livestock theft. The Phocas household is not luxurious, but it pulses with strength, stoicism, and an abundance of boiled mutton. Everyone here learns to fight young. You, though, they say, learn too young. By 5, you're already watching sparring drills with eyes so wide, it unsettles the seasoned soldiers. One day, if you toddle out to the yard and try to lift a spear, you fail, obviously, but instead of crying, you throw rocks at it in frustration until a laughing lieutenant scoops you up and declares you'll be the next general. Everyone chuckles. Then your father clears his throat, and the laughter dies instantly. By the time you're 10, you're already riding, not just in circles, like a pampered noble boy, but long, brutal marches across the Cappadocian plateau. Your first proper journey, 3 weeks. 30 miles a day is with your father's cavalry unit. They pretend not to notice how often you nod off in the saddle. You try not to scream the first time you see a corpse slumped against a tree, half-eaten by jackals. You're a Phocas. You just blink, look away, and recite the psalm your mother taught you. Sleep comes hard that night, even with the desert breeze and the lull of cicadas. Quirkily enough, your family believes in fasting and martial discipline, so no syrupy pastries or morning cuddles. You rise before dawn, train with real weapons, and eat bread so dense it might double as a blunt instrument. Even your tutor teaches Latin, with a glare that could shatter amphorae. The world you inhabit isn't one of books and liars. It's maps, supply lines, and the smell of horse sweat, and maybe, just maybe, a very confused pet hawk that keeps showing up in the barracks uninvited. Historians still argue whether this hawk was trained or just really liked your company. Yet amid all this dust and steel, something unexpected blooms. You start praying, not just the perfunctory morning blessings, but actual, heartfelt solitude. You talk to God about tactics, about fear, and once, guiltily, about how terrifying your uncle's mustache is. People start noticing that you kneel longer, whisper softer, and occasionally quote sermons. They chalk it up to your mother's side, the pious Cappadocian monks she descended from. You're not mocked, though, in fact, some grizzled veterans start asking you for blessings before skirmishes. One of them even survives 5 arrow wounds and claims your prayer deflected the 6th. Of course, you don't have time to think about miracles. You're being shaped. Every inch of your childhood is angled towards service, first to family, then to empire. There are no playdates, no wooden swords, real swords, real stakes. Your elder brother Leo starts joining campaigns before he can grow a proper beard. You're not far behind. Your father starts involving you in council meetings, and you sit there, silent and stone-faced, memorizing every name, every hill, every ford along the Euphrates. The Arab threat is constant emirs, probing the frontier. Fortresses falling, cities caught in eternal tug-of-wars. You learn to read terrain like scripture. One day, your father lets you plan a fake campaign for training. You stay up 3 nights sketching out positions, supply routes, even morale projection. When you present it, he doesn't speak for a long time. Then he just says, add firewood logistics. Otherwise, well done. You're 14. Now, there are whispers, not just of your potential, but of your strangeness, your ascetic in tastes, preferring stale bread and hard beds. You scorn silks and laugh at jewels. You once declined an ornate dagger because it was too decorative to kill with efficiently. The Foker's blood runs hot in your veins, but it's cooled by a streak of monkish severity that even your war-hardened family finds a little eerie. Yet it's that mix, blade and prayer, fire and silence, that sets you apart. You are not like the other noble boys in Constantinople, fretting over peacocks and party invites. You're the one with calloused hands and a far-off look in your eyes, like you're already standing in a battlefield 5 years from now, planning something no one else can see. You're 16 when you first smell the iron tang of a battlefield soaked in victory. The blood isn't yours. Not yet. But it will be. For now, you're still officially a trainee, just a general's son getting some exposure. But exposure in the Focus family means being placed near the front lines, while arrows thud into the dirt around your boots, and the screams of the wounded rise like some gruesome liturgy. Your job is to watch, to learn, to remember who falls and how they fall. The Arab commander on the other side is experienced, too experienced. His cavalry has been raiding Byzantine villages for months, slipping in and out of mountain passes like ghosts. He knows this terrain, but so does your father. Barda's Focus lays a trap so elegant that future military textbooks will eventually romanticize it, assuming those textbooks survive the next few centuries of library fires and barbarian invasions. You're stationed near a ridge, supposedly out of harm's way. Then the ridge begins to tremble. You grip your reins, eyes wide, watching enemy cavalry pour into the basin below like a flood of dark leather and screaming horses. Then boom, your uncle Leo gives the signal, and the cliffside explodes with hidden archers. Arrows rain down, Confused enemy riders crash into each other. You flinch, even duck once. As the sky turns black with death, your first impulse isn't fear, it's awe. The choreography of it, the terrifying beauty of coordinated destruction. You glance at your father. He's still, composed, murmuring something to an aide. You think, I want to be that calm. Historians still argue whether you participated directly in this battle or simply observed from a secure post. But either way, this moment marks you. Something clicks in your chest, like a key turning inside a lock. You're no longer training to become a general. You are becoming. The next few years are a blur of promotions, field trials, and an aggressive collection of bruises. You rise fast, not just because of your name, but because you outthink men twice your age and slice through training duels like you're trying to earn sainthood through combat. Your soldiers start calling you Ho Mikros Leon, the little lion. You pretend not to hear it, but let's be honest, you definitely heard it. Twice. Your campaigns begin in earnest around 945. The Empire, shaky and overextended, needs strong hands, and your father volunteers you with zero hesitation. You take command of a mid-sized unit on the eastern frontier, a patchwork zone of half-abandoned fortresses and terrified villagers who've seen too many torches in the night. You arrive, not with pomp, but with drills, endless drills, forced marches, wall repairs, archery, competitions. You even make the local cook rework the ration system to prevent spoiled lentils. It's not glamorous, but after 3 months, your outpost could probably survive a siege from God himself. One morning, a farmer Limsign, bleeding and gasping about raiders. You respond in minutes, not hours. Your men saddle up without a word. You ride into a nearby valley, find the trail, follow it like a hound, and catch the raiders off guard. There are no survivors on their side. You personally drag one prisoner back to camp, interrogate him in fluent Arabic, and discover the location of their supply cache. That night, you burn it. You go from being a lion cub to a full-grown threat in less than a year. Word spreads. People talk. A few even write. The chronicles begin to mention your name not yet in gold leaf, but in steady, ink-stained lines. Your reputation becomes a weapon. One village reportedly avoids attack entirely because the raiders hear you're nearby and decide they'd rather try their luck in Armenia. Quirkily enough, you also become known for your fondness for relics, not looted treasures, but bones, sacred bones. You make it a point to visit monasteries, pray before shrines, and collect minor fragments of saints' remains. Not for display, no. You carry them into battle, tucked into a little pouch over your heart. Some scoff. One sarcastic mercenary even names your horse Saint Relic. The name sticks. You don't mind. Eventually, your father retires. Age, wounds, politics, it all catches up with him. You are promoted, not by nepotism, but because even your rivals know the job suits you. Now you're a general in truth. Not just any general, the one tasked with protecting the eastern border. That soft, bleeding flank of the empire that never seems to stop aching. You study the enemy like a scholar studies ancient texts. You learn their commanders, their dialects, even their weather patterns. You predict attacks before they happen. And when they do happen, you're already in motion, There's one moment that earns you a kind of eerie fame. A siege long, misérable, full of starvation and dysentery. Your men are on the brink. You enter the chapel alone one night and pray for hours. Then, without warning, and you lead a daring night assault. It's so unexpected, so ferocious, that the enemy believes you're possessed. You break the siege in a single hour. Some later claim you wore a white cloak that glowed under the moonlight. Others say your horse didn't touch the ground. Historians still argue whether this was mass hallucination or early medieval PR. By 954, you've done more than defend the border. You've started pushing it. The Arabs are no longer raiding. They're retreating. You recapture fortresses that were lost decades earlier. You don't just kill enemies, you erase their momentum. You build roads, restructure garrisons, even host negotiations. Yes, you, the same boy who once threw rocks at a spear, you also begin developing what will later become your legacy, the military reforms. You hate waste. You hate cowardice. You hate inconsistent funding. So, you begin drafting notes, policy adjustments, training guidelines, supply chain revamps. Your quarters are filled with scrolls, diagrams, and at least 3 abandoned attempts at designing a lightweight catapult. You're not emperor, not yet, but the job is already in your blood. The court in Constantinople starts to notice. The nobles whisper. Some are impressed. Others are nervous. The Emperor Constantine VII is a bookish man, bright. Yes, but not exactly battle-hardened. He praises your victories, then promptly reminds you to stay humble. You nod, you smile, and then you go back to winning battles. Still, you're not blind. You know how this works. Glory breeds suspicion. Every successful general walks a tightrope above a pit of political jealousy. One misstep, one perceived threat to the wrong cousin's inheritance, and you're out. Or worse. So, for now, you bide your time. You lead. You build. You pray. And somewhere, deep in your bones, you start to feel it, that pull. Not just to protect the empire, but to shape it. Your name echoes beyond the border now, whispered in souks and sung about grudgingly in enemy camps. They call you the Pale Killer in some circles, not because of your complexion, but because your face never changes. You fight like marble cold, carved by purpose, and absolutely immovable. You've become something else, to something more than a general. You're not just defending the Roman Empire, you're reclaiming it, one crumbling fortress at a time. It's 955 when the real escalation begins. Emperor Constantine VII, that ink-stained idealist, with more time for manuscripts than military maps, finally dies. Some say poison, some say boredom. Historians still argue whether his death was natural or nudged by one of his relatives with access to herbs and an unfortunate sense of timing. Either way, power passes to his son Romanos II. And let's just say, Romanos is more interested in banquets than battlefields. But he's smart enough to recognize talent. He names you domestic of the schools of the East, essentially. Supreme Commander of all Eastern forces. It's a title that once belonged to the great generals of Byzantium's golden age. Now it's yours. And suddenly, you have the authority to act. Really act. Without waiting for permission from men in velvet robes, who still think war is about honor and banner placement. You don't waste a second. Your target is the Hamdanid Emir Saif al-Dawla, a skilled tactician and gifted poet who rules from Aleppo and has been a thorn in Byzantium's side for years. Saif is no fool. He respects you, fears you, even, and so begins a long, slow chess match played across cities, rivers, and deserts. You counter his raids with ambushes. He responds with lightning cavalry attacks. You send spies to bribe his allies. He sends assassins who nearly poison your wine. You write home that night, in your spiky, military script. Nice try. One day, while inspecting a half-collapsed border fort, you find something odd, a stash of silk robes hidden under a floorboard. Likely tribute meant for a corrupt official. You send the silk back to Constantinople with a note. Replace your mirrors. They lie. Meanwhile, your tactics evolve. You favor fast-moving infantry, well-drilled and lightly armored men who can climb, adapt, and improvise. You divide your forces into agile strike groups. No more bloated, lumbering columns of horses and wagons. If a soldier can't march 20 miles in a day, barefoot if needed, he doesn't stay in your army. Quirk of the year, you start assigning mules to carry mobile shrines into camp. Tiny wooden altars, complete with saint icons and little hanging lamps. Your men laugh at first, then they notice morale improving. One even swears a miracle happened after a raid. He found his lost boot dangling from the Virgin Mary's arm. It becomes a running joke. Pray for dry socks. In 957, you lead a brutal campaign through northern Syria. Your forces swarm through Cilicia, taking fortress after fortress. One town reportedly surrenders after a single siege tower creaks into view. They've heard too many stories about what happens when you get serious. You reach Anazarbus, an old Roman stronghold now in Arab hands. Its defenses are thick, its walls high. You defenders loyal. You siege it anyway. Water gets scarce. Dysentery knocks at the door. You tighten the noose. After weeks of siege, you breach the walls. The defenders fight like lions. You fight like a surgeon. Clean, efficient, precise. When the dust clears, you rebuild the fortress and leave behind a garrison so disciplined they pray before meals and after patrol. Locals begin to believe you're not just a general, you're God's own wrath in bronze armor. Meanwhile, back in Constantinople, Emperor Romanos II celebrates your victories by ordering fresh mosaics for his palace ceiling. You send him captured war banners. He sends you more silk. You can practically smell the court perfume in every shipment. But something gnaws at you. You're winning battles. Sure, but not ending the war. Saif al-Dawla keeps retreating, regrouping, and returning. You need something bigger, bolder. So you plan a winter campaign. Yes, winter. Even your most loyal captains raise eyebrows. One says, "You want to march through Anatolia in the snow?" You nod. He sighs. "At least let me grab my thicker sandals." The march is brutal. Snow up to your knees. Horses slipping. Fires dying out in howling wind. But you push through. And when you arrive, surprise freezes Saif's forces more thoroughly than the weather. They expected you to hibernate like a bear. Instead, you arrive like a frostbitten ghost with siege engines. You take Haydath, then Marash, then Zamozata, each one a jewel plucked from Arab control, each one garrisoned before you move on. The borders start to shiver. The caliphate begins to stammer. Your maps get redrawn. So often your cartographer reportedly mutters your name in his sleep. But with every fortress you take, if you notice something else, your letters from the capital get colder, shorter, less praise. Romano seems distant, distracted. You suspect he's starting to worry that the people might love you too much. You're not wrong, so you begin to soften your victories. More mercy, more gifts to monasteries. You order the construction of a church in one conquered town and dedicate it to Romanos himself. The inscription reads, "To the one whose wisdom guides our blades." Everyone knows who won that battle. Though, then comes the quiet insult. You're ordered to pause all major campaigns. The court claims strategic recalibration. You know it's fear. Fear that you'll march home with your army and take something more than applause. But instead of resisting, you bow, publicly, respectfully. You remind everyone you serve the emperor. You even write a poem, yes. A poem about loyalty. It's bad. Rhyme schemes were never your thing, but it makes the point. And yet, you don't stop planning. Historians still argue whether your next move was driven by ambition, patriotism, or quiet revenge. Maybe it was all three. Your sword may be sheathed, but your mind is still marching. Every pause ordered by the court is filled with whispers and plans, chessboards in candlelight, and long nights spent staring at the edges of maps with fingers tracing possible roads. Romanos II might want calm on the surface, but you're preparing for the storm below. You're not done, not by a long shot. Back in Constantinople, the capital simmers with its usual blend of incense and intrigue. Romanos, barely into his 20s, has found himself enraptured by his wife, Theophano Clever, beautiful, and rumored to have once worked in a tavern before seducing the emperor. She's not just decorative, she's calculating, and you can smell it from the front lines. The rumors fly fast. She listens in on council meetings. She arranges accidents for rival courtiers. And once, if you believe the gossip, she supposedly slapped a eunuch with a jeweled sandal for suggesting her gowns were too tight. The court has always been a dangerous place, but with Theophano around, it feels like a chessboard set on fire. Still, you write polite letters home. You continue fortifying the eastern frontier. You train new units. Some say you even bring in mountain tribes and teach them Greek just well enough to follow orders and chant victory hymns in chorus. One quirky little addition to your forces: pack goats. Yes, actual goats. Turns out they're excellent at climbing, don't spook easily, and can carry surprising amounts of supply bundles. Your enemies may have cavalry, but you've got goat logistics. One day, in 959, you receive a terse message. The emperor is dead. Just like that. Collapsed after a bath. No warning. No drawn-out illness. Gone. Now, historians still argue whether he was truly felled by illness, or whether Theophano decided her husband had served his purpose. Either way, the vacuum is instant. Power, Asiber, doesn't wait for morning. Romanos left behind 2 young sons, Basil and Constantine, charming little boys, not exactly ready to rule, which means someone must step in, someone capable, someone Theophano can trust, at least for a while. Guess who you are summoned back to Constantinople? Not with shackles or suspicion, but with ceremony. The city knows your name. Children shout your exploits as you ride in. Some baker even names a honey pastry after you. It's dry and hard, but somehow weirdly addictive. Eat like a general, they say. Theophano greets you coolly, as if you're a perfectly timed contingency plan. She needs a regent. You need legitimacy. She offers marriage. You hesitate for about 5 seconds. Then, you accept. The marriage is political, not passionate. You, a battle-scarred soldier in your 50s. And she, a razor-sharp empress in her prime. There's more strategy than affection in your union. But it works. You become co-emperor. Nicéforo II, Phocas, crowned with glittering ceremony in Hagia Sophia. The mosaics above practically roll their eyes. They've seen enough power grabs to know this one's got teeth. And now, you finally have it. Real power. Not borrowed authority or battlefield acclaim, but the whole trembling mechanism of empire. You waste no time tightening the reins. You start with the military. More pay for soldiers. Land grants for veterans. New rules for recruitment. You order a census of the army's gear, every sword, every sandal strap accounted for. You even standardize the size of arrowheads. Efficiency is divine. You say, like a man who's been waiting to unleash a lifetime of pet peeves on the imperial bureaucracy. Next, the walls. Constantinople's defenses are good, but not perfect. You commission repairs, upgrades, even drills, actual drills, for the palace guards, who haven't broken a sweat since your predecessor was in diapers. One guard complains about the new fitness routine. You assign him to goat patrol duty on the eastern border. He never complains again. You also turn to monastic life not for retreat, but for influence. You build monasteries, lavish ones. You pour money into holy relics, decorați chapels, and write long letters to bishops about military virtue. One fringe tidbit, you even try to ban taverns from selling strong drink near churches. The law fails partly because even monks like a good glass of something fermented, but still, you're trying to set the tone. A pious empire, a strong empire, but not everyone is impressed. The wealthy landowners, Dynatoi, start to grumble. You've been clawing back lands they acquired through very creative paperwork. You argue it's to prevent peasant ruin and military weakness. They say you're jealous. One even tries to send you a donkey dressed in royal robes as a joke. The donkey disappears. The landowner does too. Coincidentally, a few weeks later, and let's not forget the court, you walk the palace halls in armor, not ceremony robes, not jewel-toned tunics. Armor. Every day, people start to whisper, has he gone monk or mad? Even Theophano raises an eyebrow when you show up to a banquet wearing chainmail under your cloak. You tell her it's comfortable. She tells you it's terrifying. Your speeches become increasingly apocalyptic. You talk about the end times, about purifying the empire through discipline and sacrifice. Some historians think this is sincere. Others think it's just your war-worn brain slowly fraying. Maybe it's both. Still, your reforms continue. One particularly strange law prohibits perfumed oils in military camps. Too distracting, you say. Also, you ban decorative saddle blankets. Horses are not supposed to look fabulous. They're supposed to charge. Your captains quietly stitch new blankets anyway and pretend they're medical gear. And yet, amid the austerity and control, your empire strengthens. The frontiers are secure. The treasury fills. Even the streets of Constantinople get a little safer. Crime drops. Merchants smile. Well, some of them. Still. The whispers continue. They say you're too harsh. Dulcebere. That you pray more than you sleep. That your own wife fears you. Maybe she does. You certainly don't laugh much. The last time you smiled in public, someone dropped a tray of figs in shock, and deep inside, you feel it too, that sense, that no matter how many reforms you pass, or laws you carve in gold leaf, the real storm is coming, not from the east, not from the mountains, but from your own house. The torches flicker strangely tonight, as if the palace itself is holding its breath. You pace the marbled corridors, your boots echoing faintly off mosaics that have seen 100 emperors rise and fall, and never whispered a single word of warning. But something's off. You feel it in your bones. The same bones that once healed crooked after a cavalry accident in the Taurus Mountains. The weight of the crown hasn't lessened. If anything, it dies deeper every day. Your marriage to Theophano has settled into a cold truce. You share meals, share a throne, but not much else. She's clever, calculating, and always watching. And though she rarely contradicts you in public, you suspect she's quietly weaving her own safety net. She has the two young princes, Basil and Constantine, tucked neatly into her lap. If something were to happen to you, well, her succession plan is ready, and something nearly does happen. You're praying one morning. In one of your small personal chapels, you have several because of course you do when a servant reports a strange smell near the emperor's food supply. The taster goes pale after just a whiff of a meat pie. The palace physician mutters something about unusual herbs that don't grow in any Christian garden. You say nothing publicly, but that night, you eat nothing but barley porridge and stare at every dish like it's about to stab you in the throat. Historians still argue whether this was an actual attempt on your life or just one of many small palace dramas exaggerated by the court chroniclers. But you take no chances. You double the guard. You triple the prayers. You sleep with a dagger under your pillow and a backup dagger under your mattress, because paranoia is just good policy in Byzantium. And yet, despite all this, your energy stays focused where it has always burned, brightest war. The eastern frontier isn't quiet, not yet. Your attention turns to Cilicia, northern Syria, and Aleppo. The Hamdanid Emir Saif al-Dawla still holds territory you believe rightfully belongs to the empire. Is Nobushover, a warrior poet. They call him. Someone once described him as the sword of the Arabs, which you find annoyingly poetic, considering he once led a raid that burned Byzantine crops for 3 straight days while composing verses about the moonlight. But now the balance of power has shifted. Your reforms have built a stronger army. You no longer need to beg the Strategoi for cooperation, they follow orders, or they get reassigned to the farthest goat station in Armenia. In 962, you launch your boldest campaign yet. You personally lead the army into Cilicia, marching with an iron discipline that makes your men grumble by day and whisper admiration by night. You don't ride a gold-trimmed palanquin. You march on foot. When the river is too high, you cross it soaked to the waist, beard dripping, and eyes glinting like a man who might wrestle Poseidon for fun. The army smashes through the Cilician gates. Fortress after fortress falls. You recapture Anazarbus and Adana. Then comes a brutal siege of Aleppo itself. Saif al-Dawla, the elusive warrior poet, is caught off guard. He wasn't expecting this level of Byzantine fury. The city falls in late 962, and the looting as well. Thorough, Uzaitsa relics, manuscripts, and enough embroidered saddle blankets to outfit every horse in Anatolia in gaudy rebellion. One quirky tidbit: among the seized goods are 4 peacocks, which your soldiers march back to Constantinople on leashes like pampered lapdogs. The empire erupts in celebration. Your name becomes a chant in the streets, a blessing in church, and, Misarli, a trendy baby name for a brief period. Little Nikephoros becomes a minor epidemic among upper-class mothers. One aristocratic baby is even baptized in wine and wrapped in a miniature army tunic. His grandmother faints, but back in the palace, the atmosphere is colder. Theophano doesn't smile during your victory parade. She claps once softly and then vanishes behind a curtain. Your courtiers cheer with slightly too much enthusiasm, as if overcompensating for a quiet dread none of them want to name. You've brought glory. Yes, but you've also brought change. And change is terrifying to people who prefer bribes to budgets and perfume to military boots. Your public image shifts into myth. You are no longer just a general or an emperor. You are the pale death of the Saracens. A title whispered by Arab chroniclers and embroidered, with some irony, into tapestries by monks. You don't laugh at the nickname, but you do quietly order a spear, etched with it, in Greek script. Why not? If you're going to be a legend, you might as well accessorize. Back on the frontier, your generals take note. You've raised the bar. No more cozy command tents or feast night indulgences. You start inspecting your armies in disguise. Yes, in actual disguise. Including one incident where you posed as a camel seller and questioned your own centurion for 40 minutes about grain rations. He failed. He was reassigned to goat detail. But behind the iron discipline, you feel something unraveling. You don't sleep well. You pray too much. Some nights, you walk the palace halls barefoot, muttering scripture and battle plans like they're the same thing. Even your dreams smell of dust and iron and the sulfur of breached walls. You dream of Aleppo again and again, except sometimes it's Constantinople burning instead. And sometimes it's Theophano holding the torch. Whispers rise again. She spends more time with one of your protégés, John Tsimisks, a brilliant young general from the Phokas clan, a man you raised like a son, loyal, charismatic, and dangerously charming. You tell yourself it's nothing, a little strategy talk, some shared meals. You even invite him to speak at official functions, just to quiet your own doubts. But they don't go away. Historians still argue whether Theophano and Tsimisces were already plotting, or if the idea of betrayal hadn't quite crystallized yet. But you know one thing, you're surrounded by fire, and some of it is burning under the floorboards. And yet, you press on, because you're Nikephoros. You don't retreat. You rebuild walls until they shine. You commission new fortresses so thick that even birds avoid flying overhead, fearing they might bounce off. You prepare another campaign, another conquest, because movement feels safer than stillness, and war feels safer than peace. And one quiet night, as you kneel in prayer, a servant's shadow stretches too long across the marble floor. You don't see the knife yet, but it's already been sharpened. The palace is silent, unnaturally so, as if it too suspects something's coming, but is too afraid to creak or breathe. You sleep fitfully, in armor again, like always, with your dagger under the pillow and a psalm half remembered on your lips. Every whisper from the hall, every clink of a guard's boot, makes your hand twitch toward the hilt. Paranoia is your pillow. Suspicion, your blanket. They come just before dawn. Later, no one will agree on the details. Some say it was a quiet assassination, surgical and clean, carried out with the precision of a palace coup choreographed by moonlight. Others claim you fought back, that you managed to wrestle one of the assassins to the ground before being stabbed, bleeding out on the floor of your own bedchamber, with a prayer clinging to your cracked lips. But the truth, as always in Byzantine history, is messier than myth. Your assassin is no shadowy stranger. It's John Tzimiskes, your beloved protégé, your chosen heir, the man you treated like a son, the man you once lifted from obscurity and into the glittering heart of empire. He doesn't come alone. Theophano lets them in. She's part of it. Of course, she opens the door. Some say you had grown too harsh, that your reign of monastic discipline and endless military reform had become unbearable, that you turned the empire into a boot camp and the palace into a monastery. Others suggest Theophano simply tired of your grim silences, your relentless austerity, and your smell of steel and candle wax. And Tzimiskes, perhaps he just got tired of waiting. You die as you lived on high alert, wounded, betrayed, and defiant. They stab you, but it takes effort. You do not die easily. One chronicler suggests your final words were, "Even Judas kissed his master," though that seems too poetic. More likely, your last breath was a grunt, disbelief, and pain twisted together as your blood stained the very floor you'd had scrubbed daily by servants, too afraid to look you in the eye. When the sun rises, it does so over a palace changed. Theophano is once again an empress without a husband. Tzimiskes, clean-shaven and freshly robed, takes your place with disturbing ease. There's a new emperor now, John I Tzimiskes, and within days, he begins issuing proclamations full of promise and moderation, as if he hadn't just turned murder into a job application. Your body is buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles, but not with full honors. No triumphal arches, no imperial processions. You were too unpopular with the court, too severe for the nobles, too unsettling for the clergy. Your funeral is quiet, your memory immediately complicated. Some call you a tyrant, others a martyr. In the years that follow, the empire will remember you as the general emperor who never really took off his boots, the one who spent more time with maps than ministers, the one who put soldiers ahead of senators, the one who tried to carve holiness into policy and discipline into marble, a strange mix of saint and war machine, half monk, half thunderstorm. Tzimiskes, for all his betrayal, keeps some of your reforms. The army stays strong. The frontiers hold. Your legacy doesn't vanish. It just continues without your name at the top, like a general's orders still being followed, even after the general is gone. And what of Theophano? She doesn't stay long. Despite her role in your death and her influence over Tzimiskes, she's eventually exiled to a convent. Perhaps she was too dangerous. Perhaps she reminded Tzimiskes of the cost of ambition. Or perhaps, like so many women in the imperial web, she simply served her purpose and was then quietly erased. Her legend more seductive than her reality. And what of the empire it endures? That's the brutal miracle of Byzantium. Emperors rise and fall. Blood flows. Intrigue simmers. But the golden dome of Hagia Sophia still catches the morning sun. And the armies still march to your rhythms, your laws, your strategies, your reforms. They echo long after your name is no longer spoken with reverence. A generation later, your stepson, Basil II, yes, that Basil will become one of the greatest emperors in Byzantine history. He'll study your campaigns. He'll build on your work. and he'll be called the Bulgar Slayer, as if the gods of history only ever reward those soaked in conquest. Nicéforo II, Phocas, warrior, reformer, emperor, corpse. You died in your own bed, in your own palace, slain by your own protege and betrayed by your own wife. And yet, in the history books, you still loom like a figure of marble wrapped in chainmail, scowling at eternity, the monk with a sword, the general who prayed, the emperor who could never quite stop marching. And you might expect the empire to crumble a little after your sudden, stabby departure, but no, Byzantium, that indestructible hydra of intrigue, adjusts like it's done this before, because, frankly, it has. One dead emperor, that's barely a hiccup. The bureaucracy doesn't miss a beat. The grain ships still dock at the harbors. Priests still chant in incense-choked cathedrals. Life goes on, as it always must. Tzimiskes steps into your sandals with all the polish of a man who's been rehearsing his acceptance speech in the mirror for years. He assures the Senate that stability will prevail, insists your military policies will be upheld, and he promises not to strangle the treasury with monkish austerity. Cue the polite applause from nobles quietly relieved they can drink wine again without being judged by their own emperor. But here's the part they don't advertise. Tzimiskes may wear the crown, but your fingerprints are still everywhere. Your reorganized army, the tagmata and thematic soldiers you whipped into shape, they're still in the field. Your fortifications, your supply lines, your merciless drills, your compulsory land grants to veterans, they're all still humming like a war machine with its general mysteriously missing. And your enemies, they haven't exactly thrown a party in your absence. On the Eastern Front, the Muslim Emirates eye the empire's new leadership with interest and a twinge of panic, because whatever Tzimiskes is, he's not an amateur. He's inherited your blueprint, and he's not above using it. You see, one of your weirder legacies is how much of your grand strategy survives the man himself. Tzimiskes doesn't tear it down, he upgrades it. Like slapping a shiny paint job on a siege engine, he campaigns aggressively in the east, against the Hamdanids of Aleppo, against restless Arab raiders, against the ever-squabbling emirs, and wouldn't you know it, he wins. Big. He even captures Damascus for a hot minute. It's like you left him a cheat sheet with all the answers. Still, the court gossips, those tireless scroll sniffers, whisper that Tzimiskes rules in your shadow, that he dreams of erasing you completely not just from the palace halls, but from memory itself. He can't quite do it. Though, every victory he claims seems to echo something you once planned. Every military reform he announces feels suspiciously familiar. It's like trying to outshine a ghost with perfect abs and a frightening prayer routine. But let's pivot to something delightfully off-topic, your taste in architecture. Bet you didn't expect that. Most emperors build churches to get brownie points in heaven. You built fortress. You liked your basilicas functional, and your monasteries surrounded by walls thick enough to repel siege engines. One of your favorite architectural commissions was a monastery on Mount Athos that doubled as a mini citadel, because when you prayed, you wanted to be sure no one could interrupt you, unless they brought a battering ram. Modern archaeologists debate whether this preference for holy bunkers was just your way of saying, even God needs a panic room, or whether it reflected a deeper anxiety about the fragility of the empire's spiritual spine. Historians still argue whether your monastic obsession stemmed from sincere piety or a tactical move to co-opt religious institutions into your political orbit. After all, you funneled imperial resources into church building with the same gusto you applied to building roads or bridges or siege towers. But back to the juicy stuff, your memory. It doesn't fade. Oh, it twists. Sure, people argue about your intentions. Some claim you wanted to become a monk emperor, in the mold of Constantine the Great, minus the charisma. Others say you just hated fun. But military manuals continue to quote your strategies. Chronicles still list your victories with grudging respect. And your old soldiers, they remember. They speak of you in hushed tones, like you're a half-mythical creature who once walked among them, covered in scars and scripture. Even Tzimiskes eventually feels the weight of your ghost, especially when he starts struggling with the same problems you wrestled: noble corruption, frontier uprisings, the eternal Byzantine tango of church and state. He tries to bring the patriarch under control and ends up in a theological wrestling match that leaves everyone exhausted. Sound familiar? And yes, Theophanos out of the picture now, booted to a convent with enough intrigue to make nuns clutch their rosaries. Tzimiskes needed to clean house, or at least appear to. Byzantines were oddly forgiving of murder, but regicide with too much perfume that raised eyebrows. Yet the empire, that glorious, gold-drenched Leviathan, keeps rolling. The eastern provinces, once a hemorrhaging wound, now hum with fortified towns and well-fed garrisons. Armenian generals, you know, the ones you trusted more than the smooth-talking Greeks, start rising in rank. Your military meritocracy, once a radical notion, becomes standard practice. Which brings us to one of the strangest scholarly debates. Were you the last great general emperor, or the first of a new breed of military technocrats? Some say you were Rome's dying breath in chainmail. Others call you Byzantium's reboot button. Either way, no one denies this. Your reign rearmed the empire. You didn't just swing swords, you rewired the whole machine. And now, posthumously, you're sort of everywhere. In the barracks, in the liturgies, in the policy scrolls that Tzimiskes signs while pretending they were his ideas. You're a ghost with administrative authority. Not bad for a guy who once tried to outlaw silk because it was too shiny for sinners. What do you do with a legacy like that, if you're Tzimiskes? You ride it like a warhorse and hope no one notices the saddle still smells like you. You wouldn't expect a man as devoutly terrifying as you to have a soft spot. But beneath all that iron discipline, battlefield grit, and theological firepower, there is one thing you actually loved more than conquest logistics. That's right, supply chains. Warehouse, inventories, ration packs. You, Nikephoros, you were the kind of emperor who could invade a country and reorganize its granary distribution in the same week. Your enemies feared your cataphracts, but your allies whispered of your unparalleled obsession with grain silos. You knew something. Too many generals forget. Armies march on their stomachs, not their rhetoric. That's why your campaigns, especially against the Muslims in Cilicia and northern Syria, never got bogged down. You planned every foraging path, every baggage caravan, every seasonal rotation. It was like fighting a war with the soul of a quartermaster and the fists of a berserker. And then there's the really wild bit, your personal field tent. Rumor has it, it was so enormous and over-fortified that some joked it was a mobile monastery. You filled it with icons, candles, hard bread, and enough scrolls to weigh down a mule. You prayed between formations. You fasted on feast days. You quoted scripture before ordering flanking maneuver. Your men thought you were part prophet, Part, Sieger Engine. Back home, the aristocrats rolled their eyes. Of course, they called your ways rustic, obsessive, and once, hilariously, too Armenian, which was their 10th century way of saying not fashionable. But the soldiers, they'd march barefoot into a swamp if you asked. Why? Because you fed them, paid them, and didn't let them die stupidly. Historians still argue whether your obsession with logistics came from childhood trauma, something about your family's military legacy, and the brutal losses they endured in Anatolia. Or maybe it was just pure brilliance. One scholar even suggested you saw provisioning as divine symmetry, just as God sustains the soul. The emperor sustains the army. A bit of a stretch. But then again, Byzantines weren't known for subtlety. You also had a rather infamous habit of looting enemy cities politely. Of course, when you conquered Anazarbus, for example, you didn't just sack the place, you repopulated it, rebuilt its walls, and installed a tax-friendly governor. That's like conquering a neighborhood and then opening a farmer's market. But the thing that really made your enemies' teeth grind was your near supernatural ability to take one look at a mountain pass and know whether to station archers or roll boulders. The Arabs you fought called you the White Death not because of your appearance, but because your assaults were precise, cold, and eerily unstoppable. You were like snow on a roof that suddenly crashes down quiet until it wasn't. Speaking of snow, let's talk about one of your strangest victories, the campaign that unfolded in the middle of a blizzard. You led troops across the Taurus Mountains, through icy trails and frost-bitten valleys, to ambush an enemy encampment that had decided no sane general would attack in such weather. Surprise, you were never known for your sunbathing habits. And while we're elbow-deep in fringe tidbits, let's not ignore your infamous leather-bound battle psalter. That's right. You carried a customized book of psalms with you in battle, supposedly annotated with strategic notes in the margins. One commander later swore he saw phrases like, "Use flanking maneuver" scribbled between verses about God smiting the wicked. We'll never know if that was true, but honestly, it feels perfectly on brand. Of course, your rise created tension. You remember the civilian bureaucrats in Constantinople, the ink-stained elites who'd never seen a battlefield and thought you were just another brute with a sword and a superiority complex. They muttered about your military excesses and undignified tastes. You ignored them, and in your free time, you restructured the tax system to make sure more revenue went directly to the border troops. Who needs dinner parties when you've got military pensions, Tsimiskas? Now wearing your old crown like a kid in oversized armor, inherits this finely tuned military-industrial beast. And wouldn't you know it, he uses it masterfully, but his victories always feel just a bit recycled. They follow your roots, your tactics, your rhythms. It's like he's fighting a war in your voice. Still, he starts putting his own stamp on things. After all, he's not just your protégé, he's your murderer. And murderers, as a rule, hate being footnotes. He starts investing in ceremonial architecture, building grander processional halls, and redecorating imperial palaces. He's crafting the image of a refined, pious emperor who just happens to know how to wield a sword. Sound familiar? But no matter how many mosaics he commissions, he can't escape your shadow, because your real legacy isn't just chiseled into church domes or etched on battle flags. It's embedded in the mindset of an entire generation of Byzantine officers who believe the empire must be defended not with rhetoric, but with rigor. And here's the kicker, even enemies start adapting to your methods. Muslim generals reorganize their border defense systems, trying to mimic your quick-strike cavalry tactics. Fortifications on the frontier begin resembling your Anatolian models. It's the sincerest form of flattery and the most annoying. Meanwhile, your portrait grim, bearded, and staring straight through time hangs in the military academies of the eastern provinces. Cadets study your campaigns like sacred texts. They quote your disciplined doctrines between drills. Your ghost becomes an institution. There's even a folk tale, Centurillateur, that says your spirit still rides through Cappadocia during storms, inspecting garrisons in the night and striking down lazy officers. Total myth, obviously, but one with staying power. You may be dead, Nikephoros, but in the strange afterlife of empires, you've achieved something very few ever. You've become a standard, a benchmark of fear, order, and terrifying effectiveness. You're the sword in the sky that others measure themselves against. You've probably noticed by now, you're not exactly a warm, Fugilegazze Emperor. You're the kind that lives on in oil paintings with grim faces, stern scrolls, and military treatises that smell faintly of burnt parchment. But even the coldest generals have their strange romantic chapters, and yours is about to unfold with a nun. Yes, you heard that right. You, Nikephoros, the grizzled ascetic, the hammer of the East, the emperor who probably fasted more days than he ate, fell for a cloistered widow named Theophano. Let's not sugarcoat this. She was trouble, beautiful, cunning, and already twice entangled in imperial plots. Theophano was the kind of woman who could seduce a senate and still make it to evening vespers. She'd been the wife of Romanos II, the emperor, before you took over, and once he died rather suddenly. Some whispered she became the mother of 2 imperial sons and a political force to reckon with. Now, let's set the scene. You're ruling the empire in military boots, sleeping on reed mats, and trying very hard to pretend you don't care about palatial politics. And then she walks in veiled, calculating, and somehow more dangerous than any Arab cavalry charge you've ever faced. Theophano offers you a political alliance dressed as a marriage proposal. If you marry her, she says, the empire becomes unshakably legitimate. You keep the crown, she keeps the influence. It's practically business casual for Byzantium. Here's the catch, you're too religious for this. Like, genuinely, you might dream about battlefield glory, but you also dream about monasteries and fasting in caves. You hesitate. Monks warn you, advisors beg you, even some soldiers shift uneasily. But the temptation, it's real. Theophano offers access, stability, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of something resembling companionship in your bitter, blood-soaked world. Historians still argue whether you truly loved her, or if it was all pure calculation. Some say she bewitched you. Others think you were just tired of the throne, tired of schemers, tired of ruling an empire that never let you rest. One fringe theory even claims you married her just to keep her in reach, like putting a venomous spider in a jar. But that's a bit dramatic, even for Byzantium. In the end, you don't marry her. You crown her children co-emperors and let her keep her titles. But you stop just short of tying the knot. It's like proposing and then ghosting your fiancé at the altar, except with a military parade and incense. Naturally, she's not thrilled, and neither are her allies. You've just made one of the most cunning women in the empire feel snubbed, and you're living in the same palace. Meanwhile, Your enemies outside the empire are regrouping. The Hamdanids, the Boyids, the pesky emirs in Aleppo and Mosul. They're watching your domestic dance and wondering when they can strike. But you double down. You pull your army back into shape. You reorganize your elite Tagmata units, upgrade Ziga equipment, and finally commission the construction of that absurdly massive trebuchet you've always dreamed of. You name it. Holy thunder. Okay. No, you didn't. But admit it. That would have been great. Quirky fact time. You had a favorite horse named Kometes, which allegedly understood commands in Greek and Armenian. Some sources claim it could kneel for prayer. Others say it bit one of your generals who insulted the Virgin Mary. None of this is provable, of course, but let's be honest. If anyone had a pious attack horse, it would be you. Your administrative reforms keep rolling too. You rework the Akrati system, making sure frontier soldiers are better paid, better equipped, and better trained. You revive old Roman defense principles and blend them with Christian duty, creating an army that not only fights well, but believes it's fighting for salvation. And that's when you hit a theological snag. You've been pressing for monastic reforms, cracking down on corrupt abbots, reinforcing ascetic values, and trying to align imperial policy with spiritual purity. But not everyone's on board. Bishops complain. The patriarch grumbles. One particularly bold monk accuses you of trying to become a soldier saint, and not in a good way. You, naturally, take this as a compliment, but it's a reminder. Empires don't run on faith alone, so you try a compromise. You fund new monasteries, but you also tighten control over church lands. You increase donations but demand loyalty. It's a delicate balance, like trying to pray while stabbing someone with a javelin. Tricky, but not impossible. Meanwhile, whispers grow louder. Theophano is scheming again. She begins reaching out to your generals, smiling a little too long at the wrong courtier, asking a few too many questions about your health. And honestly, you don't feel great. Maybe it's age, maybe it's guilt, or maybe it's just the realization that your empire is a hydra, cut off one treacherous head and two more pop up wearing gold circlets. Still, you march forward. You begin planning the final grand campaign, one last thunderous strike deep into enemy territory. The kind of war that would cement your legend forever. Your scouts report opportunities. Your generals sharpen their swords. You prepare the banners and say extra prayers. But there's a strange heaviness in your chest these days. And the night before you're due to depart, you sleep restlessly, somewhere, outside your chamber door. Soft footsteps echo, light as silk, intent as a dagger. You don't wake up gasping. That would be too dramatic. You wake up slow, the way stone cracks not with a bang, but with a split you can feel down your spine. Your body's heavy, your limbs stiff, and something just doesn't feel right. You've woken in battle tents surrounded by blood, in desert monasteries, cold as bones, and even once in a collapsing fort. But this is different. Your breath feels thick, your tongue is dry, and for the first time in decades, you aren't entirely sure you'll see nightfall. The chamber is silent. Nordserine just unsettling. Your guards, the ones who usually greet you before sunrise, with armor ready and prayers whispered, are nowhere in sight. Only a pair of candles burn at the edges of your vision, casting tall, twitching shadows on the walls. You try to rise, but even that feels wrong, like your body's wrapped in weights, Poison, maybe. Betrayal, almost certainly. And you already know who's behind it. Her, Theophano. She never forgave you for rejecting the marriage. Never accepted that you could wield an empire and deny her a throne. And now you're staring down the consequences of that rejection. One sluggish heartbeat at a time. Historians still argue whether it was her hand that fed the poison, or whether she merely whispered encouragement in the ears of your assassins. Some chronicles accuse her directly, say she let the killers in through a side corridor, or perhaps held the door open herself. Others suggest she was framed, that maybe one of your generals, frustrated by your reforms and frightened of your popularity with the troops, decided it was safer to serve your memory than your crown. But the most popular theory, it was Tzimiskes. Yes, John Tzimiskes, your own nephew, the one you mentored, promoted, thrusted, the one you praised for his victories in the East. He was Theophano's secret card, the young, brilliant commander who had once followed your every order, and now, apparently, followed hers. You don't get a dramatic confrontation, no finale duel, no long-winded dying speech about duty and destiny. You just slip further and further into stillness, your mind flickering with unfinished plans and unspoken prayers. There's a strange peace in it. 2. You always suspected your end would come, not from battle, but from within. Not arrows or swords, but whispers and slippers. And here it is. As you drift out of awareness, you recall the irony you conquered cities, held back the tide of the caliphate, and reformed an empire rotting from within, and yet you die in your own bed. Quietly, anonymously, like a bad cough. You don't even get a torchlit funeral procession. That's how deep the betrayal goes. When the death is announced, the city doesn't riot. Theophano makes sure of that. She orchestrates a transition so swift, it might as well be choreographed. Tzimiskes assumes power almost immediately. The guards swear new oaths. Bishops chant new prayers. A few of your loyal officers protest, but they disappear before lunch. And your body, it's moved. Quietly. Secretly. Some say it was buried without honors. Others claim it was smuggled to your monastery retreat. Interred beneath a simple cross, at your own request. One Byzantine source swears your sarcophagus was later reopened, revealing a full set of armor and a single, unsigned letter resting on your chest. It read, "He died for an empire that feared him." No one's ever proven that letter existed, but the rumors lasted 1,000 years, which, honestly, is kind of a win. Here's a weird little fact for you. Within a week of your death, the palace kitchens were scrubbed top to bottom, allegedly because the lingering smell of garlic and vinegar was making courtiers nauseous. Garlic and vinegar, coincidentally, being two ingredients in a common Byzantine poison antidote. Subtle, right Tzimiskes, to his credit, doesn't completely erase you. He even publicly mourns, declares your reign glorious, sends gifts to your monastery friends, names a few reforms after you, but then he does exactly what you'd feared. He marries Theophano. The empire shudders. Monks whisper. You would have screamed. Historians still debate whether he loved her or just needed her, whether he was a power-hungry opportunist or a reluctant successor forced into betrayal. Some call him your Judas. Others say he was the empire's next logical step, more political, more pliable, more polite. But even with you gone, your shadow doesn't leave the throne. Your military reforms persist. Your frontier defenses halt. The Arab campaigns you began are picked up again, modified, diluted, but continued. Your reputation shifts from terrifying to legendary. A few generations later, scribes begin calling you Nikephoros, the White Death. Sounds like a Game of Thrones boss, but it stuck. Meanwhile, Theophano continues her slow-burn domination of Byzantine history. She helps raise her sons, pulls strings behind vials, and ultimately lives to see her bloodline endure longer than any general or monk could have guessed. Historians either love her or despise her. There's no in-between. She's either the Empire's Eve or its Cleopatra, depending on who you ask. And here you are reduced to memory, but not forgotten. Your military manuals survive. Your siege strategies are copied. Your coins are found in distant deserts. One coin, minted in Antioch, shows your face with an expression so severe it looks like it could make a camel confess to treason. Your final legacy isn't in marble statues or golden domes. It's in the quiet, steady hum of discipline that pulses through the army for years after you're gone. Soldiers still train with your tactics. Generals still quote your maxims. And the phrase "fight like focus" becomes, oddly enough, a compliment. So you didn't get the glory you expected. You didn't die in a blaze of battlefield fire, carried by 12 spear bearers and wept over by emperors. But you got something better. In the long run, you got permanence. You became the ghost that lives in every Eastern campaign. The cautionary tale whispered between sword drills. The man who reformed a decaying empire through sheer will, fasting, and a truly unsettling glare. And honestly, that's not a bad way to be remembered. You don't haunt the palace. That's not really your style. No creaky floorboards or rattling chains. Instead, you linger in the decisions that follow. In the shapes of helmets, in the structure of pay scales, in the reinforced walls of distant outposts. You're a memory, not a ghost, but you still manage to scare people. After your death, the Empire holds its breath. For a man like Nikephoros Phocas, ascetic, brutal, terrifyingly competent, the power vacuum is immense. There's no one quite like you left in the capital, and certainly no one with your talent for looking at a crumbling defensive system and saying, what if we rebuilt everything, but better? So now you watch, figuratively, as John Itimiscus takes over. He's flashy, where you were severe, charismatic, where you were intense. He throws banquets, smiles in mosaics, trims his beard in ways that suggest he knows he's going to be painted on a lot of church ceilings. And yet he keeps many of your policies. You were a hard act to follow, and even the man who helped end your life knows not to mess with military reform too much. The armies stay lean and mean. The standing professional soldiers you created remain in place. Your emphasis on cavalry persists. Even your obsession with fortifications lingers, though Tsimiscus adds a bit more flair. Golden inlays, polished gates. You know, things that sparkle for visiting ambassadors. But there's one place where your spirit feels most alive, Cilicia. That volatile, contested borderland between Byzantium and the Abbasid Caliphate. A region you bled for. Not literally, though you came close. You cleared fortresses, planted garrisons, and even built roads there. Roads that still carry soldiers and grain, long after your bones are dust. Historians still argue whether your Cilician campaigns actually stabilized the frontier or just temporarily paused the bleeding. Some say it was a strategic masterstroke, Others suggest you overextended, fueled more by ego than logistics. One scholar claimed you just really hated desert bandits and took it personally. All plausible, but there's no denying the result. For the first time in a century, the eastern provinces feel secure. The towns start building again. Markets reopen. Even a few churches pop up, nestled between garrison towers and sun-baked aqueducts. You gave them breathing room, and in the Byzantine world, that's almost as good as peace. Here's a strange footnote for you. One of the border villages, somewhere near Germanicia, reportedly named its communal well after you, the Spring of the Iron Emperor. It's not elegant, but it's heartfelt. A traveling monk recorded it in his diary, noting that even decades after your death, old women still cursed scorpions by muttering your name under their breath. That's how you know you've made it. Meanwhile, back in Constantinople, Theophano continues to glide through court like a velvet dagger. She supports John Tzimiskas's reign publicly. Anyway, but rumors swirl. Whispers about more poisoned goblets, secret letters, and a plan to put her own sons on the throne. Eventually, you always knew she played the long game. She's practically an institution now, equal parts queen, regent, and PR manager. Tzimiskes, for his part, continues your eastern ambitions. He pushes further into Mesopotamia, wins a few key battles, even gets celebrated in the Hagia Sophia with hymns you might have found too sentimental. But he never entirely shakes your ghost. Every new conquest invites a quiet question. Would Nikephoros have done it better? He probably would have. With fewer casualties and a stricter dress code, there's one final legacy that surprises even your fiercest critics: your influence on military spirituality. See, before you came along, Byzantine commanders weren't exactly known for monastic tendencies. But you, with your fasting, your midnight vigils, and your constant invocations of divine wrath, changed the model. Suddenly, it's fashionable to quote scripture before battles. Officers start fasting during Lent. Chaplains get real budgets. Some historians claim you blurred the line between general and monk. Others suggest you were just leveraging religion to build authority, less piety, more politics. There's even a fringe theory that you were planning to abdicate and become a hermit in Sinai before Tzimiskes ruined everything. That one's probably just wishful thinking from your fan club. Still, the effect is real. A generation of soldiers grow up thinking strength and sanctity go hand in hand. That to be truly invincible, one must be both devout and dangerous. Pray hard. Step harder. As one cynical recruit put it, you wouldn't have approved of the slogan, but the sentiment, that was all you. In one particularly bizarre episode, a regiment stationed in Trebizond reportedly held a fasting competition during Holy Week. Whoever lasted longest without food or sin got promoted. 3 soldiers collapsed from hunger. One tried to sneak in a boiled egg, and the commander decided maybe next year they'd just pray instead. It's not exactly the ascetic legacy you envisioned, but it's a legacy nonetheless. Meanwhile, whispers of canonization start to bubble up. Not officially. Of course, nobody wants to risk turning a former emperor into a saint too soon. But among frontier soldiers and desert monks, the stories grow. Visions, dreams. The time someone swears they saw your silhouette in the smoke above a battle, directing arrows like a holy ghost with a grudge. No official saint's day, no relics, but your name gets stitched into battle standards anyway. And that's the thing. You never wanted sainthood. You wanted strength. security, an empire that didn't have to look over its shoulder every 5 minutes. But maybe, just maybe, those monks are onto something. Maybe your fierce devotion misunderstood, weaponized, occasionally terrifying was a kind of holiness, or at least, a deeply tactical brand of it. So you endure, in carved lintels and cracked frescoes, in worn-out training manuals that still teach focus formation to sleepy recruits, in nighttime prayers murmured by men with swords, who aren't sure if you were emperor or angel, but feel safer invoking your name anyway. And out on the far reaches of the empire, where the hills are dry and the wind smells like dust and figs, there's a small, cracked inscription on a stone wall. No fanfare, no gold leaf, just 3 words, he held firm. And that, for you, is enough. You're not alive to witness it. But if you were, you'd probably smirk just slightly at the Byzantines' latest obsession with legacy, especially yours. After all, when you were breathing, no one wanted to sit next to you at banquets. Now, they can't stop talking about you. Theologians begin whispering your name alongside the more respectable saints. Soldiers scribble prayers that start with O Nikephoros, which, to be fair, could be addressed to either a general or a thunder god. And schoolchildren in Constantinople recite your victories like their bedtime stories, though they skip the part about your monastic sleeping arrangements. Because even for Byzantines, that's just too weird. And yes, the whispers of sainthood grow louder. No canonization yet, but let's be honest. Your brand of holiness isn't exactly what the church committees are into. You weren't a martyr. Not officially. You weren't persecuted by pagans. Unless you count your own dinner guests. And your miracles, mostly logistical. You made entire armies appear where no supplies should have reached. You turned failing campaigns into triumphs. You smote people from such distances, it was practically divine. But there's this one story that sticks. It crops up in a few sources, obscure manuscripts, frontier gossip, even a suspiciously polished sermon delivered in Trebizond. It claims that during one of the many raids along the eastern border, when the Turks swept down unexpectedly and panic spread faster than arrows, a single soldier lost, wounded, outnumbered, saw a figure walking calmly through the dust, tall, cloaked, armored in something too old to be regulation. The figure raised a hand, and the wind shifted. The attackers hesitated, horses reared, and the Byzantines, against every probability, rallied. When asked later what had happened, the soldier whispered your name. Historians still argue whether this was just battlefield hallucination, a psychological coping mechanism, or according to one particularly jaded academic Byzantine flair for over-dramatized nonsense. But the tale endured, because deep down, the empire needed you to still be out there, watching, protecting, smiting, as needed. Meanwhile, back in the realm of verifiable facts, the military institutions you left behind start to evolve, but slowly, too slowly. If you ask your ghost, your successor, John Tzimiskes, builds on your reforms but adds more diplomacy. You never really trusted ambassadors. Too many robes, not enough swords. But he manages to secure some temporary peace treaties and even convinces a few local warlords to switch allegiances. It's a soft power approach. You would have called it suspiciously polite. Still, your influence lingers in every ledger. The streamlined tax system that ensures soldiers are paid on time. The new rotation policies that keep garrisons from going stir-crazy in dusty fortresses. The strict training regimes that emphasize discipline over flashiness. Even the Emperor's Council finds itself quoting your old field notes. They're preserved in battered codices, half covered in mud stains and prayer scribbles. One curious regulation of yours becomes a bit of a joke, the two-shoe rule, your demand that soldiers never, under any circumstance, march without proper footwear. It started as a practical health policy, blisters, kill morale. After all, but over time, it turns into a sort of superstition. A unit once refused to leave camp until their replacement boots arrived, delaying an entire campaign by 3 days. You'd probably applaud the dedication and also dock their pay. And then there's the church. Officially, they remain wary of elevating an emperor to divine status, especially one who restructured the military like a monastic order and spent half his reign fasting like he was auditioning for sainthood. But quietly, very quietly, icons begin to appear. Not in Constantinople. Of course, that would be tacky, but in remote monasteries, carved into cell walls, or painted in the margins of prayer books. In one, you're shown riding a white horse, flanked by Saints George and Demetrios, as if the Holy Cavalry Club has accepted you as a junior member. Your face is stoic, unreadable. You wear a cloak that looks suspiciously like the one you actually wore into battle, mud-streaked, with embroidered crosses that look like they were added by a monk, with no fashion sense. Meanwhile, your family name, Focus, gains near-mythic status. Nephews and cousins try to ride the wave, claiming descent from you, with dramatic flair. Most of them are incompetent. One distant cousin famously lost a whole fortress because he mistook a banquet horn for an alarm bell and fled the scene. Still, people keep promoting Foca's relatives, hoping they inherited even a shred of your spine. And let's not forget the fringe fanatics. A small cult-like following develops in the Anatolian highlands, peasants and retired soldiers who pray to you for strength, endurance, and just enough intimidation to keep their goats from being stolen. They build little shrines with carved wooden helmets and light candles, using leftover lamp oil from the garrison days. One of them even writes a hymn in your honor. It's musically awful but heartfelt. You're referred to as the Iron Monk of the East, a title that's both metal and mildly ridiculous. But beneath all the legends and revisions, something real persists. Fear. The kind of respect that doesn't come from charisma or charm, but from sheer, relentless competence. The Empire remembers how you made their enemies tremble, how you took a battered military and forged it into something that could hold a line, how you turned defense into dominance, without once smiling for a mosaic. A general from the later Komnenian era reportedly kept a small statue of you in his tent. Not a bust, just a blocky wooden carving. When asked why, he shrugged and said, "So I remember not to sleep too long." And maybe that's the essence of your afterlife, not sainthood or statues, but sleepless vigilance. You're not the emperor of dreams. You're the emperor of wakefulness, the one who reminds Byzantines that survival takes discipline, that empires don't rest, that somewhere, beyond the Euphrates, someone is always sharpening a sword, and if they want to be ready, they'll need to lace their boots, fast twice a week, and remember your most important rule: never assume peace is permanent, because Nikephoros Phocas didn't. Your empire breathes, but it never fully exhales. Not since you, that tense, poised stance you left behind, has become the Byzantine default, setting one foot in prayer, the other braced for siege ladders. It's not a comfortable way to live, But comfort was never part of the package. Was it you taught them that, even now, decades after your dramatic exit from this mortal plane, the army still marches in your formation, square ranks, standardized signaling, mobile supply depots? It's not glamorous, but it works. The generals complain. Of course, they always do. But when they find themselves outnumbered in Cilicia, facing cavalry that doesn't blink, it's your discipline that saves them, not their prayers, not their dynastic connections. You, and back in Constantinople, your reforms echo through the marble halls like the ghost of a lecture, the fiscal systems you instituted, still humming, more or less. Landowners grumble at the continued enforcement of the Stratiotica Catamata, the lands specifically tied to military service that you insisted couldn't be broken up, sold off, or turned into a vineyard for bored aristocrats. Every time a noble tries to skirt the rule, some mid-level bureaucrat named Gregorios pulls out a parchment with your wax seal on it and says, "Focus said no." That usually shuts them up. But the weight of your legacy is tricky. For the emperors who follow, it's like having a dead uncle who was also a drill sergeant, our prophet, and an overachiever with unresolved trust issues. Everyone wants your results. No one wants your lifestyle. Take Basil II. For example, a couple of decades after your death, he rises up and earns the nickname Bulgar Slayer, which, to be fair, is solid branding. He doesn't just remember you, he studies you, adopts parts of your military structure, even mimics your cold detachment. Though his eyebrows are far more judgmental, Basil wins because he borrows your spine, not your smile, because you didn't have one. Still, there's one major difference between you and the emperors, who come after you genuinely didn't care about being liked. Basil pretends not to care. Tzimiskes at least tried to be charming while backstabbing. But you wore asceticism like armor, and treated flattery like incoming arrows. You made courtiers nervous, just by standing in the same room. And yet, for someone so publicly unimpressed with politics, you left a deeply political ghost behind. Monasteries whisper your name during fasts. Military academies teach your campaign routes, like sacred geography. The Armenians write songs about your siege at Tarsus, though they add a dragon in the story, which you'd probably approve of, provided the dragon pays its taxes. Still, your legend isn't all horsehair helmets and martial piety. A more controversial narrative starts cropping up among the more conspiracy-inclined monks. They begin to link your death gruesome, intimate, unceremonious to a sort of mystical symbolism. Some even say you knew it would happen, that your monastic dreams showed you everything Tzimiska's knife, Diophanos' betrayal, the cold marble beneath your back, and still you walked into that room. Historians still argue whether you were genuinely caught off guard, or whether you'd given up by then. One school insists you became too devout, lost your edge, mistook ascetic surrender for imperial clarity. Another claims you had simply seen enough, that a life of endless war, brutal reforms, and uneasy alliances had worn your willpaper thin, that maybe, just maybe, for you lay down that night, not because you trusted your killers, but because you'd already buried yourself in work, disciplina, and silence. The truth lost to time, like your voice. No one remembers what you sounded like anymore. There are descriptions of your walk measured, with a slight limp from an old wound, of your scent, something between myrrh and saddle oil, but your voice gone, which is fitting. Honestly, You were never much for talking, but your silence rings through the empire like a bell no one dares touch. There's even a rumor that a piece of your cloak one you wore during the Mesopotamian campaign is kept in a small reliquary near Mount Latros. Pilgrims hike up to it, kneel before it, and ask for strength. Not healing, not mercy, strength. That's the difference with you. They don't come to you for miracles. They come to get punched spiritually in the sternum. Meanwhile, on the frontiers you once defended, the world shifts. The Fatimid Caliphate rises in Egypt, becoming a more sophisticated threat than the fractious emirs you clashed with. Trade routes shift. Desert fortresses fall, not to armies, but to irrelevance. The border moves not by blood, but by bureaucracy. And still, your name gets invoked at every step. One general, sent to reconsolidate Byzantine control over Antioch, writes a letter to his wife. In it, he confesses that every time he plans a siege, he asks himself, would Phocas approve? He then admits that the answer is usually no, followed by, then try harder. You'd probably hate the sentimentality of it, but you'd also be flattered. Not that you'd show it. There's even an imperial sculptor who attempts to commission a statue of you full regalia. Sword drawn, eyes fixed on the horizon. It's rejected by the council. Too martial. Dosidious. Not welcoming enough. The sculptor carves it anyway, hides it in a barn, and says he dreams of setting it up on some empty hill near the eastern frontier, so that you're always facing danger, always watching. But that's the thing with you. You were always watching, never blinking. Note, even now, the Byzantine Empire remembers a lot of names, but yours is the one they whisper when the torches go out and the wind carries the scent of unfamiliar campfires, when footsteps echo outside the city walls, when priests forget their prayers and soldiers remember their drills. You are what they become when comfort dies, and the empire remembers its scars. And even now, the scar shaped like you still itches. Your memory clings to the borders like moss on a cold stone wall, quiet, persistent, and impossible to scrape away. No matter how many emperors wear the purple after you, none ever quite fit the armor like you did. They tinker, they reform, they bluster, but none carry that same haunted discipline. That brutal efficiency born from a lifetime of mud-slicked battlefields and candle-lit war scrolls. You were never just an emperor. You were a warning. And out here, far from the soft glow lanterns of Constantinople, your ghost still pulls the strings. The Anatolian frontier you once fortified is still stubbornly holding, even as Arab raids evolve into more sporadic, less predictable strikes. Your old themes, those military provinces you defended so fiercely, have changed hands again and again. Like worn coins, the soldiers are less disciplined now, their boots not quite as well maintained, but the bones of your reforms remain intact. Even when the outer layer crumbles, the skeleton holds. A commander named Bardas Skleras emerges, claiming divine mandate and imperial legitimacy. A bold move, but not unheard of ambition, is the second official language of Byzantium. He marches east, stirs up the soldiers, whispers promises of glory, and tries to ignite the old flame of military revolt. It's like watching a poor actor stumble through your lines. Same stage, worse lighting, and nobody remembers their cues. Historians still argue whether Skleros was a genuine threat to the empire or just a symptom of deeper rot. Some say his rebellion echoed the very instability you tried to crush. Others claim he merely showed how fragile the system remained when stripped of a true warlord emperor. But the real irony, the troops he used to challenge the imperial throne, were drilled in your style. They marched in your formations, fought using your manuals. The man trying to break the empire was wielding your playbook. Meanwhile, back in the capital, the bureaucracy creaks forward. Your civil reforms, especially those meant to check the aristocracy, have been quietly softened, rewritten. Even, turns out, no amount of tax logic or legal parchments can permanently stop rich men from buying things they shouldn't own, especially people, especially soldiers. You had tried to limit land accumulation, to preserve the small military farmers that made up the empire's backbone. But once you were gone, so was the fear. They start gobbling up land like Byzantium is a board game and they're cheating with both hands. Not even the emperor dares to enforce your rules too strictly. Everyone wants stability, but no one wants to do the laundry list of uncomfortable things it takes to achieve it, like disempowering their cousins. And yet, despite all that erosion, the army still invokes your name, not for poetry, not for inspiration, for tactics. You're the war god they summon when the trenches are wet. The horses are skittish, and the general has stopped pretending he knows what he's doing. Your legacy, you see, isn't gold or marble or oaths. It's efficiency under pressure, relentless, sleep-deprived, armor-chafing competence. There's even a curious moment in a minor skirmish near Aleppo where a junior officer pulls out an old leather-bound field manual. It's not official issue anymore, it's something he inherited from his grandfather. The diagrams are crude. The ink has bled through, but the formation outlined is unmistakably yours. He uses it. The unit survives. They call it the Foker's Wheel, even though it's just a circular flanking maneuver that you once used during your campaign into Syria on a particularly rainy Tuesday. No less. Quirky. Yes, but that's how your memory lingers in coffee-stained diagrams, in whispered strategies, in battlefield, slang passed down from exhausted centurion to wide-eyed recruit, not as holy writ, but as grim practicality, because you never made war poetic. You made it functional, and it's not just the military. Some monks, particularly those who favored your late-life monastic leanings, start claiming minor miracles at the sight of your death. Nothing headline-worthy, just vague feelings of protection. Small weather anomalies, crops that grow better near shrines built in your name. Naturally, the church doesn't canonize you. Too messy, do political. But in the quiet corners of Mount Athos, you're something between a cautionary tale and a vigilante saint. One monk writes, Phocas did not pray for peace. He prayed for strength to fight what could not be avoided. That quote winds up etched onto a monastery gate. Still there. Apparently, unless some well-meaning renovator has scrubbed it away. And Constantinople, of course, does what Constantinople does. Best absorb, adapt, survive. New emperors rise and fall. Some cite your example as justification for their own military dreams. Others try to erase you, literally chisel you off commemorative stones only to find that your legacy is more deeply carved into the army than any marble wall. A fun little fringe theory even pops up around this time, that you never truly died, that the corpse found wasn't yours, and that you vanished into the desert like a prophet king, destined to return when the empire is on its knees. Completely ridiculous, but also oddly flattering. They call it the hidden emperor theory. It gains just enough popularity to become a nuisance. A few rural militias start invoking your name during uprisings. One even claims to have seen you, robed in black, holding a sword made of moonlight, whispering battle plans to their leader. Unsurprisingly, they're crushed within a week, but not before drawing a cartoonishly accurate image of your face in blood on a chapel wall. Eventually, someone important asks, "Should we officially denounce this focus cult?" And someone smarter replies, "Why, he's scaring our enemies for free." That's your brand now. Not just emperor, not just general, but myth. A kind of Byzantine Batman, with a taste for fasting and an intolerance for sloppy marching. There's even a line that gets passed around the barracks in hushed tones. Focus doesn't bless you. He just watches. Seid half in jest, but only half, because in the back of every soldier's mind, especially those stationed near the Eastern Front, there's a tiny voice that says, "If I mess this up, he'll know." You trudge through the thick mists of history as the Empire wrestles with its own reflection, how to honor a man like you without repeating the mistakes that brought his reign to a bloody end. The Eastern Front is quieter now, but tensions simmer under the surface like hot coals, waiting for a careless spark. Your military reforms have become a blueprint that every ambitious general tries to claim, yet no one quite replicates your ruthless discipline. The aristocracy, those ever-hungry power brokers, are circling again. Your attempts to curb their influence felt like throwing pebbles at a charging bull. They own more land, more wealth, and more soldiers than ever. It's a Byzantine soap opera, with more betrayals and less popcorn. And you're the ghost, in the script, equal parts inspiration and warning. One particularly peculiar fact, despite your strict military rule, you are known to have a soft spot for animals, especially dogs. Some chroniclers mention your fondness for keeping hunting dogs, which were trained to accompany you on campaigns, perhaps a quirk, but it humanizes the man behind the armor. Meanwhile, the military manuals you authored, tactically sound but brutally efficient, are copied and recopied, becoming sacred texts among the army's elite. Some scholars debate whether your influence stifled innovation by making commanders too reliant on rigid doctrines. Historians still argue whether your legacy is more of a blessing for discipline or a curse for flexibility. Back in Constantinople, the palace intrigues continue. Your reforms in the tax system linger in bureaucratic memory, but corruption creeps back. The empire's heart beats unevenly, held together by tradition and fear rather than the sharp edge of your sword. As you fade from memory into legend, your story becomes a tale told at campfires and whispered in monastery halls, a reminder of a time when emperors ruled not just by birthright, but by battlefield prowess. Your life is a patchwork of facts, myths, and legends, some as sharp as your spear, others as soft as the twilight fading over the Bosporus. You feel the cool stone under your fingertips as you walk the marble corridors of Constantinople's great palace, now shadowed by the memories of your reign. The city hums around you, a mix of merchants shouting prices, monks chanting in distant chapels, and the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. It's a world shaped by your efforts to balance military might with civil administration, yet still teetering on the edge of chaos. Your military campaigns have reshaped borders, but it's your reforms in army logistics that keep the empire's pulse steady. You introduced the use of specialized siege engines and better supply lines, concepts that sound obvious now, but were revolutionary then. Soldiers could march farther and fight longer because you tackled the ugly problem. Nobody wants to think about feeding and equipping thousands on the move. In a curious twist, you once ordered your troops to wear garlic wreaths to ward off what was believed to be evil spirits in the camps. a quirky practice that probably smelled worse than it helped. The superstitions of your era intertwine with military pragmatism in strange ways, and you don't seem to mind. After all, morale is as important as the sword. Historians still argue whether your aggressive campaigns against Muslim forces truly secured long-term peace, or simply delayed the inevitable conflicts that would rage for centuries. But in your time, you were the shield and spear of Byzantium, pushing back enemies with a zeal few could match. Meanwhile, back in the city, the everyday lives of your citizens pulse on bakers kneading dough, children playing near fountains, and the chatter of merchants weaving tales as vivid as your battlefield stories. You once thought ruling meant controlling all of this with an iron fist, but history shows even the mightiest emperor can't dictate every heartbeat. Your legacy lives on in the dusty pages of history and the whispered legends in taverns. An emperor remembered not just for conquest, but for transforming an empire's spirit, sometimes with a garlic wreath and a spear, sometimes with stubborn grit and a vision that refuses to die. You trudge through the dusty camps once more, this time feeling the weight of new challenges pressing in. After your triumphant campaigns, you're faced with the daunting task of defending the freshly reclaimed territories, where every village could hide a rebel or an enemy spy. It's not the glory of battle that haunts you here, but the slow grind of governance on hostile soil. Your reforms extend beyond swords and shields this time. You focus on fortifications. You order walls rebuilt and new watchtowers erected, understanding that military might, without solid defenses, is like a sword without a hilt. Your engineers introduce innovations in castle design, with concentric walls and reinforced gates, making it a nightmare for any would-be invader. On a lighter note, it's said you had a peculiar habit of testing these defenses by sneaking out at night, disguised as a common soldier. Though some whisper it was just a rumor spread by your political rivals to make you seem eccentric. Imagine the emperor sneaking around in cloak and sandals. Definitely not the regal image you'd expect. But hey, if it worked to find weak spots, why not historians still argue whether these fortification efforts truly secured your eastern borders or simply postponed the next wave of invasions? Defensive walls can keep enemies out for a while, but empires have a knack for eroding from within. Back in the empire, life continues with its messy unpredictability. Markets overflow with spices and silks. Street musicians play tunes that blend Greek melodies with Eastern rhythms, and the smell of roasting meat mingles with incense burning in temples. It's a reminder that while you strategize on maps and battlefields, the empire's heartbeat is found in these small, vibrant moments. You realize that empire building isn't just about conquests. It's about stitching together a patchwork of people, places, and stories, each thread essential to the whole fabric, and no amount of military genius can weave that alone. You find yourself riding through the bustling city streets of Constantinople, the imperial capital, a place humming with life and intrigue. The air is thick with the scent of fresh bread, mingled with the tang of the nearby sea. Merchants shout their wares, from fine silks to exotic spices, while beggars weave between crowded market stalls. As emperor, you know this city is the heart of your empire, but also a nest of plotting minds and uneasy loyalties. Your reforms extend beyond the battlefield, and fortifications you set your sights on the army itself. The old guard, proud and set in their ways, grumbles about your new tactics and rigorous discipline. You push to professionalize the troops, introducing stricter training regimens and more standardized equipment. No more patchwork armor or mismatched weapons. Your soldiers will look and fight like a single cohesive force. It's said, you even insisted on wearing the heavy, gleaming armor yourself during drills, earning you the nickname the Pale Death among your troops, not for your looks, but for your relentless presence. On the lighter side, rumors spread that you had a secret fondness for spicy foods, a rarity in the Byzantine kitchen, which may have fueled your fiery temperament both on and off the battlefield. Some even joke that your soldiers' endurance came from your personal chili recipes. Historians still debate if that's a flavorful exaggeration or just another quirky tidbit lost in time. Meanwhile, scholars argue about the true effectiveness of your military reforms. Did they revolutionize the Byzantine army, or simply patch cracks in an already crumbling structure? Regardless, your dedication to transforming the troops reshaped the empire's fighting spirit. As the sun sets behind the city's majestic domes, you glance toward the horizon, knowing that the peace you've carved out is as fragile as the flickering flames of the oil lamps lining the streets. The next challenge waits. Silent, but inevitable, you trudge through the rugged landscapes of Anatolia, to the eastern frontier of your empire, a wild patchwork of hills, forests, and ancient ruins, whispering tales of battles past. Here, the air tastes of dust and pine, and every footstep crunches over stones, scattered like forgotten memories. This is the front line where your vision of a renewed Byzantine realm is tested against the encroaching powers of the Muslim Emirates. Your campaigns against the Muslim forces are relentless, a series of swift, decisive strikes that surprise your enemies. You prefer to take the fight to them, launching raids deep into enemy territory, disrupting their supply lines, and seizing key fortresses. Your military strategy combines the old Roman discipline with innovative tactics learned from skirmishes and espionage. The precision with which your troops operate earns you respect, even fear, among your adversaries. One curious detail historians love to whisper about you supposedly favored a type of siege engine that hurled not just stones but pots filled with burning pitch, a nasty surprise that earned your troops a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Whether this was common practice, or just a clever tale spun by your enemies, is still a topic of heated debate. You also introduce reforms to the thematic system, those military provinces that supply soldiers and govern the lands to ensure quicker mobilization and better resource management. It's an administrative puzzle, but one you tackle with the same vigor as your battlefield commands. Yet, amid the victories, you can't ignore the strain on your empire's resources or the fatigue creeping into your soldiers' eyes. The constant warfare is a delicate dance on a knife's edge. One misstep, and the fragile gains could vanish like morning mist. As twilight descends, you pause atop a hill, surveying the lands you've reclaimed. The scent of smoldering campfires mingles with the cool evening breeze, and you wonder how long this uneasy balance will hold. You march onward, now turning your attention to the strategic city of Aleppo, a jewel coveted by many, perched like a sentinel over the trade routes of Syria. The city's ancient walls loom ahead, a tangled fortress of stone that has weathered countless sieges. The air here is thick with anticipation, and a faint hint of jasmine from nearby gardens, to a strange comfort amid the shadow of war. Your siege tactics here are brutal, yet methodical. You cut off supplies, isolate the city, and wait with a patience that tests your troops' endurance. As much as the enemy's, you deploy your famed cataphracts, heavy cavalry, armored like medieval knights, but faster and deadlier. Watching them charge is like witnessing a thunderstorm sweeping over the plains, a blur of steel and fury. But it's not just brute force. You employ diplomacy and cunning, negotiating with factions within the city, exploiting rivalries among its leaders. Some say you even used Greek fire during the assault. That terrifying liquid flame which burns, even on water. An invention as fearsome as a dragon's breath. Historians still argue whether it was actually deployed in Aleppo, or if that's just fiery propaganda. Despite the harshness of the siege, you order your men to spare the city's churches and mosques. A nod to your complex relationship with religion and politics. You're a warrior emperor. Yes, but also a pragmatist, who knows that respect can be a weapon as sharp as any sword. Your success at Aleppo isn't just military. It sends a message to your eastern enemies that Byzantium under your command is a force not to be trifled with. The city eventually falls. Its gates open to you after weeks of attrition. The spoils are considerable, but it's the strategic advantage that counts the roads, now safer for your armies and merchants alike. You catch a moment's quiet beneath the stars, the distant sounds of celebration, mixing with the chirp of crickets. Victory tastes sweet, yet you're aware the war is far from over, and the empire's future still hangs in the balance. You push further into the Levant, eyes fixed on the coastal city of Antioch, a prize of mythic importance and a vital gateway to the Mediterranean. The salty breeze carries the cries of seagulls and the distant clang of hammers on armor as your troops prepare for what will be a grueling campaign. You know Antioch's capture would not only secure your eastern frontier, but also restore Byzantine prestige that had dimmed for decades. The city's defenses are formidable, boasting thick walls and towers that rise like stone giants against the sky. Your engineers begin constructing Caesar engineers catapults, ballistae, and battering rams, each one a testament to your commitment to innovation in warfare. It's a slow process, and the tension gnaws at you like a persistent itch. You find yourself pacing beneath the hot sun, the dust coating your armor and settling into every crevice. As the siege drags on, you discover a secret network of tunnels beneath the city, remnants of ancient craftsmanship that could offer an entry point for your forces. You send in your most trusted scouts and soldiers to navigate this subterranean maze, their torches flickering in the darkness, shadows dancing on damp stone walls. It's a dangerous gamble, but one that could turn the tide. During the assault, you personally lead a charge on the eastern gate, rallying your men with a voice that carries over the din of battle. Your presence on the front line is both inspiring and terrifying, an embodiment of the warrior emperor ideal. You're reminded of the stories about Achilles or Alexander, those legendary figures who combined charisma with sheer martial prowess. Historians still argue whether your personal leadership in this assault was decisive or merely symbolic. But there's no denying the morale boost it gave your troops. The city finally succumbs, its banners lowered, and Byzantine flags raised in triumph. The victory secures a vital stronghold and sends ripples through the Islamic world, signaling a shift in power dynamics. You take a moment to savor the salty air of the Mediterranean, mingled now with the scent of victory and the distant call to prayer, a reminder of the diverse cultures you govern and the complex legacy you shape. The dust settles over Antioch, but your campaign's momentum pushes you onward. Next up, the fortress city of Aleppo, perched like a crown jewel on the Syrian plains. The landscape here changes subtly. Instead of craggy cliffs, you trudge across sun-baked earth, peppered with olive groves and date palms, their leaves whispering secrets in the hot wind. Your army marches under the relentless sun. The heat, a constant, simmering presence. But your focus never wavers. Aleppo is no easy prize. The city's walls have weathered countless sieges, and its defenders fight with a fierce determination, born of pride and desperation. You deploy your famed cataphracts, the heavy cavalry, with their gleaming armor and thunderous charge, striking fear into enemy lines and shattering resistance. It's one of your key military innovations, and you take pride in how these mounted warriors have changed Byzantine warfare. But the siege tests not only your military tactics, but your patience and supply lines. Stretched thin in the arid terrain, you rely on local allies and caravans. They're traders and guides indispensable for navigating the complex political tapestry of the region. You learn to read the subtle signs of shifting loyalties. Like a chess player, anticipating moves several turns ahead. During Atenselul, you receive word that your use of Greek as the empire's official language is stirring mixed reactions among your subjects. Some appreciate the cultural unification, while others, particularly in distant provinces, grumble about losing their native tongues. Historians still argue whether this linguistic reform strengthened the empire's identity or sowed seeds of dissent. As you push your siege engines closer and tighten the noose, you reflect on your dual role as both warrior and ruler, the delicate balance of sword and scepter. The city finally falls, and with it, your control over a critical section of the eastern frontier is solidified. You watch the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red hues, feeling the weight of both conquest and responsibility settling on your shoulders. Your gaze shifts eastward, where the deserts stretch endlessly and the echoes of ancient empires seem to whisper beneath the scorching sands. The campaign now leads you toward the strategic city of Melitene, a vital bastion guarding the eastern approaches. You trudge through dust-choked roads, the relentless sun beating down, your armor feeling heavier with each step, but your resolve remains ironclad. Melitene's defenders are a mix of hardened warriors and local militias, their knowledge of the rugged terrain making every advance a cautious affair. You implement new siege tactics, combining your well-disciplined infantry with innovative artillery, including the famed Greek fire, an almost mythical weapon that sets enemy ships and siege engines ablaze with terrifying ease. It's a spectacle both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The flickering flames, painting night skies with unnatural light. Yet amid the war machines and battlefield strategy, you find time for subtle diplomacy. You meet with local leaders. Their hospitality, a mix of wary respect and veiled suspicion. Their languages, customs, and religions differ widely, reminding you that your empire is a patchwork quilt of cultures. Your decision to elevate Greek as the empire's lingua franca continues to ripple through these diverse lands. A bold move historians still debate for its impact on unity and alienation. One curious detail you notice during the campaign: many soldiers carry small charms and talismans worn for protection or luck, hinting at the complex tapestry of faith and superstition threading through your ranks. You suppress a smile, imagining a cataphract, placing more faith in a rabbit's foot than his own lance. The siege is grueling but successful. Melitene falls, strengthening your grip on the eastern frontier and securing a critical supply route. As the dust settles, you contemplate the paradox of war destruction, breeding opportunity. The collapse of foes paving the way for your vision of a renewed Byzantine glory. You ride northward, the air cooler, but thick with anticipation, as you prepare to face the resurgent Bulgar threat. The Danube's muddy waters mirror the storm gathering on the horizon, political and martial storms that test every ounce of your leadership. The Bulgars, fierce and cunning, We have long troubled your empire's northern borders, and their raiding parties disrupt trade and harvest alike, solving unrest among your people. Your forces gather on the plains, a mixture of veteran soldiers hardened by years of campaigns and fresh recruits eager for glory. You drill them relentlessly, emphasizing discipline and formation, innovations you've championed since ascending the throne. These reforms have transformed the Byzantine army into a lean, efficient fighting machine, a fact your foes underestimate at their peril. As the Bulgars approach, you recall the tales of your ancestors, who battled nomadic hordes with varying success. You deploy your troops with precision, leveraging your cavalry's speed against the enemy's mobility. The clash as thunderous arrows darken the sky, steel rings against steel, and the earth trembles under the charge of horsemen. At one point, you glimpse a Bulgar war leader adorned with a wolf pelt, rallying his men with blood-curdling cries that echo across the battlefield. Amid the chaos, you personally lead a counterattack that turns the tide. Your presence, a beacon of courage. It's said you fought with such ferocity that even your own men feared the wrath you unleashed on the enemy lines. Historians still argue whether this personal valor was a calculated act or sheer battlefield instinct. But the result is undeniable. The Bulgars break and flee, their threat diminished. For now, a quirky tidbit. Your soldiers had a peculiar superstition involving carrying garlic into battle, believing it warded off evil spirits, a charming and somewhat smelly ritual amid the bloodshed. Victory secures the northern frontier, but you know this peace is fragile. The empire's survival depends on constant vigilance and the unyielding will of a leader who can balance war and governance with equal skill. You find yourself walking through the marble halls of Constantinople, the weight of your recent victories pressing down like the golden crown upon your head. The capital, always alive with the hustle of merchants, priests, and scholars, now buzzes with whispers of your military genius and reformist zeal. Your victories against the Bulgars and Muslim forces have rekindled a fragile sense of hope in the hearts of the citizens, who had grown weary from years of conflict and economic hardship. But ruling an empire is more than battlefield triumphs and loud cheers. You turn your attention to the intricate web of court politics, where loyalty is as fickle as the Aegean Sea's tides. Your reign, though victorious, is shadowed by tension between the aristocracy and the military elite. You're a warrior emperor, after all, and some traditionalists grumble that your reforms threaten the old order, especially the powerful landed families who've long dominated Byzantine politics. In one of the palace's quieter chambers, you meet with your trusted advisors to discuss the empire's finances, the lifeblood of all your ambitions, maintaining a standing army, funding fortifications, and supporting the church require more coin than the treasury currently holds. Your new tax policies aim to tighten the grip on wealthy landowners and merchants, a move that sparks grumbles, but is essential for sustaining the empire's military prowess. Historians still argue whether your financial reforms actually strengthened the Byzantine economy, or merely shifted burdens without fostering real growth. Your critics suggest that some of your policies alienated key supporters, planting seeds of discord that would later bloom into rebellion. A quirky tidbit: you reportedly had a fondness for a simple dish of lentils and olives, eaten late at night while poring over battle plans and state documents, comfort food for a warrior emperor. Perhaps, as dusk settles over the city, you gaze out over the walls of Constantinople, the domes of Hagia Sophia catching the fading light. You remind yourself that the empire's fate rests not only on the sword, but on shrewd governance and the delicate art of balancing power within. The weight of empire presses on you as rumors of conspiracy drift through the corridors like a chilling draft. Despite your military brilliance and dedication, whispers of dissent among the aristocracy and even some generals are impossible to ignore. You trudge through the cold stone halls, and the echo of your footsteps mixing with murmurs of betrayal. Some claim your reforms have made too many enemies. Your reign is not without peril. The assassination attempts that begin to surface are a grim reminder that power in Constantinople is as precarious as balancing a sword on a blade's edge. You recall that one bizarre assassination attempt involved a monk wielding a hidden knife during a religious procession, a mix of faith and fury that highlights the complex forces at play in your empire. Meanwhile, the eastern frontier simmers with unrest. Your commanders report skirmishes with Muslim forces attempting to reclaim lost territories. The ongoing conflict requires your constant attention, a delicate dance of sending reinforcements while managing resources back home. You order the strengthening of frontier fortresses and encourage the use of new military tactics honed from your earlier campaigns. Historians still argue whether your reliance on heavy cavalry innovations was a decisive factor in these victories, or if the resilience of your infantry was the true backbone of your army's success. It's a debate that keeps military scholars awake well into the night. But for you, it's about practical survival, not theory. You also indulge in a peculiar superstition before any major battle. You insist on wearing a particular amulet, said to protect against harm. A charm gifted by a mysterious elder during your youth, a symbol blending faith and folklore. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the Marmara Sea, you steel yourself for the challenges ahead. The Empire's future hinges on your ability to navigate not just battles, but the treacherous currents of power and loyalty within. Your days blur into a relentless cycle of strategy meetings, inspections, and political maneuvering. Yet your mind often drifts to the quieter moments, a rare sunset over the Bosporus, the smell of incense in the Hagia Sophia, or the sharp tang of salt air during a rare stroll along the city's walls. You notice how the city itself seems to pulse with life and tension, a living entity caught between decay and glory. The palace intrigues intensify. You discover that even your closest allies harbor doubts or ambitions, and navigating their shifting loyalties requires as much skill as commanding troops in battle. You recall an amusing episode when a diplomat mistakenly addressed you with the wrong title during a crucial negotiation, causing a brief but awkward silence, a reminder that even in the highest circles, human error keeps things entertaining. Your reforms continue unabated. You push for improved logistics, better training regimens, and the introduction of specialized units like the elite cataphracts, whose heavily armored riders become a symbol of your military prowess. Yet, some veterans grumble, preferring the old ways, leading to a subtle but persistent cultural clash within the army ranks. Historians still argue whether your reforms represented a revolutionary break from tradition or a natural evolution of Byzantine military doctrine. This debate colors modern views of your reign, but does little to ease the practical challenges you face daily. You harbor a secret fondness for exotic spices, often requesting rare saffron and cinnamon to flavor your meals, a small luxury amidst the demands of rule. It's a minor indulgence, but one that humanizes the stoic image many have of you. As the empire faces renewed threats from the east and internal unrest simmers, you remind yourself that every decision, no matter how small, we could tip the balance between survival and collapse. The weight of the crown presses heavier, but your resolve remains unbroken. The air in Constantinople thickens with whispers. Plots weave through the marble halls like smoke from an unseen fire. You find yourself increasingly on guard, aware that while your sword has won battles, your mind must now outwit assassins and traitors. The conspiracy you uncover is a tangled web involving disgruntled nobles, jealous generals, and even some foreign agents eager to see your reign crumble. You recall a peculiar detail, a poisoned cup, supposedly disguised as a gift of rare wine, intercepted just in time by a vigilant servant. It's almost comical how the simplest objects can become instruments of death. Yet, this grim reality keeps you vigilant, reinforcing the precariousness of power. Your military campaigns press onward. The sieges are long and grueling, testing the endurance of both your soldiers and your own patience. Yet, your innovative use of siege engines and naval blockades gradually turns the tide. Your troops begin to chant your name, a rare burst of morale that carries them through muddy trenches and endless nights. A lesser-known but fascinating fact is your habit of personally inspecting frontline camps disguised as a common soldier. This hands-on leadership surprises your enemies and endears you to your men, though your advisors fret endlessly about the risk. Historians still argue whether this was brave leadership or reckless endangerment. Meanwhile, in your reforms in military justice, aim to curb corruption and improve discipline. Though not everyone welcomes the change, some veterans grumble about losing privileges, and whispered dissent grows louder in dark corners. You learn to navigate these complaints with a mix of firmness and subtle diplomacy. Despite the heavy burden, you indulge in quiet moments of reflection, often staring at the vast expanse of the Marmara Sea, wondering how much longer your empire can withstand the storms of war and politics. The future feels uncertain, but your determination to secure your legacy never wavers. The late afternoon sun slants through the windows of your imperial chamber, casting long shadows that seem to mirror the growing uncertainties surrounding your rule. You, Nikephoros, have always thrived on the battlefield, yet now the battles of the mind, political intrigue, alliances forged and broken, demand your sharpest wits. You feel the weight of empire pressing in, the relentless push to secure the eastern borders while maintaining control over the fractious court. Your campaigns against the Muslim forces have pushed far, reclaiming lost territories and even expanding your domain. Cities once whispered about only in legends are now back under Byzantine banners. But with every victory, you find new challenges. Rebellions flare in distant provinces, and old enemies lurk, waiting for your attention to falter. The fortress walls you once stormed now become symbols of your fragile grip on power. In one of your less-known strategies, you commission a network of signal towers along the frontier, using fires and smoke to relay messages swiftly across vast distances. This early warning system gives your armies precious time to prepare for sudden raids. Some scholars argue whether this network truly turned the tide or was merely a minor tactical advantage. Back in the capital, you are not immune to whispers about your personal life. Some accuse you of being overly ascetic. Others suggest rumors about your temper and ruthless streak. Yet, your soldiers respect you for sharing their hardships, even eating the same coarse rations and enduring the same harsh winters. This paradox of emperor, as both feared and beloved, complicates your legacy. The burden of reform weighs heavily. Your efforts to reshape the army, introducing stricter discipline, new tactics, and improved training, face resistance from entrenched interests. Some veterans grumble that the old ways were better, while younger soldiers see promise in your vision. Historians still debate whether your military reforms were revolutionary or simply an extension of long-standing Byzantine traditions. As dusk falls, you sit by a window, watching the city lights flicker like stars caught between heaven and earth, and wonder what the next day will bring. The empire is yours to defend, but the shadows grow longer. Night drapes its velvet cloak over the city, the distant murmur of the marketplace fading into a soft hum. You, Nikephoros, find a rare moment of stillness amidst the ceaseless demands of rule. The empire, vast and complicated, breathes around you, its triumphs and trials etched into every stone and soul. Your reforms, your battles, your sacrifices, they all ripple through time, shaping a legacy that scholars will argue over for centuries. You recall the battles fought under the scorching sun, the clash of swords and the roar of armies, and contrast them with these quieter struggles in candlelit chambers. The empire's future rests not only on military might, but on wisdom and foresight. Your decision to uphold Orthodox Christianity, your patronage of monasteries, and your efforts to strengthen internal administration all intertwine with your warrior spirit. A curious fact surfaces your epitaph, carved centuries later, describes you as the Pale Death of the Saracens, a nickname that echoes both fear and respect. Yet, behind that fearsome title lies a man shaped by the hopes and fears of his people, a leader wrestling with duty and destiny. Some historians still debate whether your assassination was the inevitable result of your uncompromising rule, or a tragic misstep by ambitious courtiers. The truth, like many shadows in history, remains elusive. You lean back, eyes closing as the night deepens. The stories you've woven, the battles, the reforms, the human moments linger softly, a lullaby for restless minds. The empire sleeps, and so do you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and drift gently with the whispers of Byzantium fading into your dreams.